So as we kick off, we actually want to know how everybody else attended Convening Leaders. So we've got a poll set up and we want to hear, did you attend? If you did, how did you attend? And we'll look at those results here in a minute. But also we want to hear from you. So we're encouraging everyone to use the chat and the Q&A window. So in the chat area, if you want to post up where you're joining us from and how many Convening Leaders have you attended. So I put in there, I'm joining from Montana, and Convening Leaders 22 was my 9th Convening Leaders attended. So really exciting about that. And I want to welcome our guests here. We're going to be talking about digital experience. We have Alison and Jillian joining us today. Alison is the Director of Events for American Society of Cell Biology, and Jillian Cardinal, Partnership Manager for Braindate by E180. So thank you guys for joining us. We're really excited to have you and hear firsthand from you what it was like being a digital attendee at a hybrid event. This is a topic I don't think gets discussed enough as we're talking more and more about hybrid events. And I want to kick off the conversation while everyone's answering the poll and chatting where they're joining from. But I was reading an article from Quartz. Conferences, concerts, and sporting events are about to get a whole lot better. And it was talking a lot about just the experience and how hybrid events are changing and how they're very important to the success of where we're going in the future of events. So I thought it was just a timely article. It came out in the Convene daily newscast that they email every day. So I encourage you guys to check that out. So Jillian, Alison, thank you for joining us today. And I want to kick off a couple conversations. So Jillian, the first thing I want to ask you, you actually participated, interesting, because not only were you an attendee, but you also ran one of, I think they were called conversation starters or their community conversations. And you had an unique visitor in one of your sessions. So talk to us a little bit about that first.
Sure. So clearly, hi everyone. Clearly, I attended digitally, but they reached out because I'm a PCMA 20 in their 20s and DES as to be kind of an ambassador and to host a conversation starter. So I hosted a digital conversation starter. And what was great was during it, all of a sudden someone popped up on screen. She was clearly sitting outside and we realized that she was actually in Vegas. So she was an in-person attendee who decided to join in on our digital discussion and see what it was like. So it was a way to bridge together the two audiences that was done in a very fantastic way that I haven't been seeing so much around yet. And that's something that could be happening in order to intentionally connect and unite the two audiences in an engaging manner.
That was fun. So did she participate in the conversation or just join mostly to listen?
She did participate. So she was able to kind of pop up on the screen the way that we're doing now. She engaged and then she hopped away as well.
That's awesome. I think that really explains like the hybrid experience, right? And regardless of your geography, being able to join. So Alison, question for you. You didn't join us in Las Vegas because you're getting ready to have a baby. One of the many beautiful reasons to not attend a conference. So when you were at home experiencing Convening Leaders, were you getting FOMO? Like, was that part of your, feelings about not being able to be there in person?
Yeah, 100% FOMO. I had attended many Convening Leaders in person over the years, and it's definitely a different experience in person versus online, sitting behind a screen. You get a little bit of Zoom fatigue behind a screen. The time zone issue is definitely there. The networking, the chance encounters, just meeting people. Megan, you and I met in a line waiting for chair massages years and years ago. And so I missed out on a lot of that. I was able to connect with others that were participating digitally, but it's just not quite the same.
Right. Yeah. And that's a fun fact that I have for our audience joining us, that Alison and I did meet serendipitously at a Convening Leaders conference, as she mentioned, waiting in line to get chair massages. So that was fun. And Jillian and I have actually never met in person. The universe has crossed our paths many times. We've collaborated on many calls together, but have actually never met in person. So one of these days, maybe at the next Convening Leaders, we'll have to change that.
And that also does show, though, the magic of virtual, because you can still have that we didn't have that beautiful serendipitous bathroom chat or massage chair chat, but we were still able to connect in some ether world. And one day we're going to be able to.
Absolutely, for sure. So I guess one of my questions was, is there an upside to joining digitally? So was there one benefit, maybe getting to wear sweatpants and not having to put on real clothes every day? Is there one upside that you guys had from joining digital? And Alison, go first.
Yeah, I think the upside was the fact that I could still attend the meeting and I could still watch the educational sessions and interact with some people that were able to interact with me. As you mentioned, I'm pregnant. I wasn't able to fly to Vegas, and then with the added layer of COVID, my doctor did not clear me to go. So I would have just missed out completely. And this allowed me to at least be a participant.
And Jillian, what about you? Was there an upside for you?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree there, because for personal and professional reasons, I didn't attend in person. I was going to, but it was a last minute change. Had there not been a digital component and that thoughtfully planned out, I would have just missed everything in general. So I didn't have to. I still had access to content, to some aspect of connecting as well, and meeting new connections that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
And did you find, Jillian and Alison, we'll start Jillian with you, that you were still juggling, home responsibilities, work responsibilities? Because I think when we attend in person, we can kind of separate and be like, I'm out of the office, I'm done, like call me when I'm back. Did you find that you were still trying to work and have your normal life while participating digitally?
My colleagues were super respectful of the fact that, like, this is PCMA. Let's pretend Jillian, so to speak, is actually there and not going to be as accessible. There'll be a bit of a delay. But what I noticed, especially, and I'm like, yep, this is in Pacific time. So the day started a bit later, so to speak, for the event. So I was just, doing my normal work in the morning, checking in throughout as well. But then the day just went later into the evening. So where you typically have that adrenaline that also gets fulfilled in different ways when you're in person, this was behind a screen even longer into the evening, still having that adrenaline pumping from a live event that's occurring, and then having a shorter evening personal time, jumping back into your workday in Eastern time, and then repeating. So it definitely was a longer day with a different way of filling up that you would have often in person with others.
And Alison, you have a 2-year-old at home. So were you juggling Kyle and work and also joining sessions?
Yeah, so he goes to daycare on Tuesdays through Thursdays, but the Monday of Convening Leaders was quite interesting, trying to juggle getting him fed, because right around the time those first sessions started was just around his snack and lunch times. And then, as Jillian mentioned, the sessions could go into the evening for us. So I found myself eating dinner with the laptop at the table, trying to watch the sessions while I fed him. And the best part was he absolutely loved Paula Abdul. He got to watch her concert with me, and he was dancing while he was eating. And it just brought back memories from my elementary school days. So it ended up working out, but there are definitely things you have to juggle.
For sure. So speaking of Paula Abdul, one of the things that I noticed in the digital schedule for Convening Leaders is there weren't necessarily some of those private moments just for digital attendees like there were in 2021, where we had, happy hours and unique experiences, sort of the mashup studio type thing. So do you think that you missed out on having some of that maybe special experience just because you were digital, like maybe a dance lesson from Paula Abdul for 15 minutes or something? Was there a moment that you wish you had that, special moment like we did in person at the receptions and things? Jillian.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to differentiate the magic moving forward when we're planning hybrid events, is creating two distinct, in a way, events. I'm not saying anything fully new here, but in the sense of, we have a whole different universe available to us when we're a digital audience. So you can still have that in-person experience, let's say, of Paula Abdul. And to your point, what if the digital attendees are getting to have a 10-minute kind of behind the scenes with her, or a walkthrough of the making of this? So we're getting to see a bit more and have that tailor and curated experience for us. And then perhaps that too can be brought to the in-person attendees. And if they want to actually participate digitally, again, it's hybrid, they could. So I think that intentional design for the digital audience is critical. And something that was great last year was they did do kind of a community service component where there was like a DJ duel, and you would send in some donations and then you can send in your song request. And it was just fantastic in the evening. Everyone's dancing, everyone's vibing in the chat. And having those types of special experiences just for even the digital attendees, whether it's for a CSR component or some sort of experiential aspect, I think could definitely strengthen the digital experience.
Alison, any extra thoughts on that?
I agree with Jillian. I think that, when you like PCMA, not this past year, but the year before, when everybody was virtual, a lot of thought was put into the things that Jillian mentioned. But because the main focus seemed to be more the in-person experience, and then the digital, us attending virtually was it wasn't an afterthought, I wouldn't say, but it was definitely a separate component in a lot of ways. Even sessions that were in-person only that I wanted to attend. Just figuring out a way to either to give us special experiences, but also figure out ways to merge the two audiences, like Jillian's surprise guest in her session, figuring out ways to kind of force that a little bit more so that we're experiencing more of what the people that are in person are experiencing.
Right.
And
I think, go ahead, Jillian.
Just to add on top of that, I think that's going to be something that's so critical moving forward of how we're presenting and marketing our events. So is it a hybrid event, digital, in person, or is it an in-person event where digital attendees can participate as well? So that, I don't want to say dividing, but again, intentionally designing for each of these two experiences and almost tracks in a way is going to be so critical. Otherwise, it maybe shouldn't be called a hybrid event.
Yeah, I see Alison and Robin in the chat here. And this is a common thing that I've heard on a few like wrap-up calls and happy hours and things, is that people were struggling to figure out what was in-person only sessions. Maybe there were digital only sessions. So I think that's a strong takeaway, I think, for all of us, is being very clear of what you get and what access you have to certain type of content, depending on if you're in person or a digital participant. So I think one other thing you guys mentioned was talking about a host and enhancing that experience for digital attendees. And at the in-person event, we have an MC. We have Holly every year. I think we all kind of know who she is at this point because she's the host, right, for Convening Leaders at this point. Do you think there should be a separate MC or hybrid host, if you will, for that digital experience? Like, I know there was one for the mashup studios, but if you didn't attend that session digitally, then you didn't necessarily get to see Crystal and all of her, fabulousness, because she only did mashup studio sessions. So do you think that having a host like Holly for digital would enhance your experience? Either one of you.
Sure, I can start. So fun fact there was I didn't know about Crystal, and I discovered her when I was hosting a cocktail and catch up at the end of this event. And I didn't attend Mashup because I was attending other things. So I heard she was fantastic. Where I think it would be super relevant is, again, going to what was said before. So if you have a very targeted design digital experience, and obviously a targeted designed in-person experience, that, I'm going to say digital Holly, that digital Holly could then be presenting what the digital attendees, and almost creating that FOMO as well. Perhaps it's going to be recorded, so then the in-person could experience it too. But the in-person is seeing, what are the digital attendees getting to do, as we're getting to see what the in-person are getting to do. And then the two Hollies could then interact one another to, again, make that bridge between the two audiences. But if it's just going to be, again, not designed in that manner, it may not be as relevant. It's creating that FOMO as well.
Alison?
I think Jillian got it right. The interaction between the two, between Crystal and Holly, would have been really cool. Having Crystal appear a little bit more for the virtual audience, because as we're seeing in the chat, a lot of people didn't even really know about the mashup studios or did not attend them. I was fortunate to have attended a few of them, not all of them, but Crystal was fabulous. And I think it kind of gave us an insight into what was happening on site that we were missing. So it kind of almost created more fear of missing out. So in a way, it makes us want to physically attend in the future. But I do think that was a bonus for those of us who did attend the mashup studios.
And this, I mean, that leads right into my next question for you guys. And we talked about this kind of in our prep call for today, is so much of hybrid right now is thinking about bringing the in-person to digital. And I don't think we're talking or really planning a lot of how we bring the digital into the in-person experience. And I think you guys just talked about a great opportunity for that, where maybe Crystal and Holly then could have done something together. Or is there a way to have a digital participant participating in an in-person session beyond just maybe the chat and Q&A? Like, can we bring someone on camera? And I think, you know, what you guys have talked about, bridging that and bringing the two audiences together is really important. Is that something that you would have liked to see more of, maybe Crystal and Holly interacting, or, you know, just being more included in the in-person as opposed to pushing the in-person to digital?
There was a fantastic session led by my friend, or our friend actually, because he knows everybody, Sarab. And what he did super well was he literally announced, you know what? I am going to give you my phone number, digital attendees. If you want to jump in, so to speak, on a call and live workshop right now, we will do that. And because it was so spur of the moment, you know, there wasn't really necessarily a ton of people jumping in, but the option was there. So perhaps if that's, again, thoughtfully designed into it, or people were prepared to know that that could happen, I think that could be a huge success. So he was very clear on having a moderator who was pulling comments from the chat and then incorporating that into his own discussion with everyone. And then again, giving that action that people could join in during the workshop live, even if they were digital.
I think it could have been a really good learning. I mean, this is a meeting for meeting planners, right? And our suppliers. And I think that it could be really cool to kind of do the reverse of what the mashup studio was, where Crystal was showing us what was going on in person. If, you know, certain sessions are virtual only, or there are certain experiences that they create for the virtual audience, bringing those to the live audience at the beginning of some of the big sessions, and having Crystal show people, like, this is what they're doing virtually. It's kind of cool. They're getting to do these types of interactions and things like that. And really kind of feeding it both ways, as you said before, Megan. And I think that is very important, because it's difficult at a hybrid meeting to really make both audiences feel connected with each other. A lot of times people think about it as two separate meetings. And I think it's really, really important to bridge the gap, not just in one direction, and do it bi-directionally.
Well, I think one of the big examples and sort of takeaways on that I took from the meeting was on the last, I think it was the last keynote, there was a hologram presenter. And a lot of the chat around that session was the digital people saying, what does it look like on stage? And the people in person chatting back to them saying, well, what does it look like on the computer? You know, and everyone sort of engaging and talking about their experience, even though there was just one session that everyone was watching. So I found that really interesting, and sort of a great way to have that interaction between the two audiences around one common theme of the hologram and what that kind of looked like from both sides. So I thought that was interesting. Kind of keeping on the audience engagement piece here that we're talking about was, you know, Alison and Jillian and I were pretty active in chatting and commenting on the social feeds and pictures and things. I think Alison was asking me what day I lost my voice, because every single year the two of us lose our voice at the show. And did you find that people that were in person were engaging with you on the chats and messaging and being interactive, or were they too sort of focused and consumed by the in-person experience versus maybe a digital participant? So like Jillian and Alison communicating with each other because you're both digital. So what was that experience like? And, you know, I was trying to be super sensitive and respond to any messages I got, but I know I'm not the norm. So what was that like for you, Alison?
I definitely had more interaction with other people that were participating digitally than I did in person. I did interact with you, but I did send messages to a few people who I felt like I was missing, because I met them at previous convening leaders. And, you know, I reached out to them telling them I missed, you know, seeing them in person, and they went unread or unresponded to. So I get that, because when I go to an in-person meeting, you're very much like involved with what's going on in person, and you're going from event to event, and it's very busy.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is that kind of created a further disconnect between myself and the in-person audience at times, personally.
And Dana put in the chat, and that was actually one of my comments. So like, as far as realizing who was on site versus who was digital. So if we're talking about the in-session experience, there was a certain point I didn't even realize if the chat was just for the digital attendees or everyone combined. So seemingly it was everyone combined, AKA seamless. But what I noticed with the messaging, I'd have messages, where are you going to be? They assumed that I was on site, because that was, again, the plan up until the last minute. But then there was also the part of me that's like, what is their intention for being on site? So if they're actually on site right now, I'm going to reach out to them probably on LinkedIn a bit later versus messaging them directly during this. And so I use that time to connect with other digital attendees.
Good point. I did notice, and I actually, my meeting manager at ASCB attended the meeting in person. And when I was looking through the attendees, it wasn't very clear, like Dana said, who was on site and who was attending virtually. So it made it more difficult. I assumed that certain people were in person based on comments they made during chats and things like that. But I do think that a better differentiation of the attendee lists and things like that, so when we go through it, we can see who is actually physically in Las Vegas versus those that were.
So I guess my question would be, would that change how you interact with them if you knew they were in person versus digital? It would.
I think it would, other than like the social feeds when people were posting pictures and I was telling them that I was jealous and things like that on the thing, because I wasn't there. But I think it definitely would have, like Jillian said, I may not have reached out to certain people that I saw on the list if I knew that they were going to be, we schedule meetings all day long outside of the session. So be cognizant of that and kind of leave them alone until after.
Gotcha.
Maybe what I would do there is perhaps give a little bit of a nudge, and like, okay, I see that you're in person. Enjoy 100%. I can't wait to hear about it. I'm going to book a call like after, once you kind of have that downtime and you come home and get over jet lag and your emails, let's have a chat. And kind of to Sydney's question, so how many people connect in app versus the more permanence of spaces like LinkedIn? What's great with the in-app is right away, it's kind of that, oh, hey, there you are. But for myself, I continue the conversations on LinkedIn after 100%. I don't know if Alison, you'd be the same.
I see your head nodding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to share the results of our poll. So we're actually kind of split across the board here, which is really interesting. 50% in person, 30% digital, 20% did not attend. So really interesting feedback there. And Annette was asking, were you still able to set meetings as you would in person? And Alison commented she scheduled 2 meetings on the app. So that's awesome. And Alison, when you met with those people who were in person, what was that meeting like? Did they join your session with inside the app and the platform, and you guys were just on a video call? What did that meeting look like?
Yeah, we tried. I was having difficulty with the platform because of my browser and laptop at the time, so I couldn't share my video. So I ended up setting up a Zoom meeting outside of the app, but we did make the schedule in the app. And they joined from they were at their hotel room at the time because they were West Coast versus East Coast.
Gotcha.
We were able to figure out a good time to meet. One of them was just an interview about meetings and the future of meetings, and the other one was just connecting with an old colleague. So
very cool.
I've got a question on that, actually, Alison. So that first person, did you know them before, or you saw them from going through the directory, so it was cold?
So he actually, I believe he posted in the social feed that he was looking for people to interview regarding digital events and the future of events. He's from Germany, I believe, but he was attending in person. And I responded to him that if he's still looking for people, he could contact me. And then he reached out. So it was just a quick 15-minute interview. It's kind of cool. I'll share the results with me after.
Very neat. That's super cool. Well, we have just a couple minutes left, so I wanted to read an excerpt from this article as we kind of wrap up and sort of get final thoughts from Alison and Jillian about their experience. But this article from Quartz about conferences, concerts, and sporting events are about to get a whole lot better, which I totally agree. I think we don't even realize we've been experiencing hybrid events our whole lives. But when you think about football games or baseball games, you know, I'm cheering just as loud at home as I would be if I was actually in person at the game. You know, we think about the Super Bowl coming up this weekend. That technically is a hybrid event, right? We have two audiences. What we get at home and what we get at the actual game are very different. And they're different experiences. They're intended to be different. That's why we have sportscasters and announcers, right? That is technically a hybrid event. So I think this article kind of touched on that. And a couple of excerpts from it that I took away were, to move forward, we need to shelve the mindset that one type of audience is more valuable than the other and replace it with a more inclusive perspective. This is not only transform the experience for everyone when you know just how big the audience really is. For decades, event organizers have strived to improve physical events by making sure there's not a bad seat in the house. To end that, physical venues have benefited from advances in architecture, investments in Wi-Fi to power in-person second screen experiences, and innovations in audiovisual systems. Our industry needs to put the same type of thinking into making hybrid events successful. Great hybrid experiences will require advances in both technology and design to deliver an exceptional live streaming experience for at-home participants. So that just really resonated with me. And I think some of the words that we've talked about were intentionality, that you really have to think about those cross points between the two audiences and really make them intentionally. And they have to be designed in the onset from that. So with all of that in mind, Jillian, final thoughts on your experience. What did you think? Would you join digitally again?
Okay, so many questions right there. So I am so thankful that, again, when the decision was made at the last minute to not attend in person, that I had the opportunity to be able to attend digitally, 100%. I have still yet to attend my first in-person event in this new chapter. I am very much looking forward to this when, deciding to do that. What I would say is, I think that there should always be a digital component to events where people have that option. So whether it's for Alison's reasons or my reasons, we have our reasons. And I think that's so important. I think as far as even from a risk management standpoint, if something was to happen and we need to scale really quickly, you can do that digitally. So understanding that, but that being said, we have to just be cognizant whether it's being marketed as a hybrid event or if it's going to be an in-person event with a digital component, or a digital event and then in-person components as well. So that's where we just have to be clear on the intention and the purpose of the event that we're planning, and then design both with that in mind moving forward.
Yeah, we just had a chat. Robin, you're absolutely right. Accessibility is important. And in this age of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that is super important. And the digital option certainly feeds into that inclusivity that we keep talking about quite a bit. Alison, final thoughts, takeaways. I want to see you in person at another Convening Leaders to tear up the dance floor with me. But would you join digitally again?
If the circumstances were what they were this year or similar, then I would definitely join digital. I like being able to have that option. I definitely prefer attending in person. I think that the connections you make at an in-person event are irreplaceable personally. But just being able to have that option, I did connect and I did meet a few people digitally that I did not know previously. So I was really grateful for that opportunity, because otherwise I just would not have attended. So I think
we're grateful that you still got a chance to attend. And actually, I'm going to wrap up with this one question for you, Alison, because Diane posted in the chat talking about venue costs and Wi-Fi and how expensive it's getting, that venues need to be able to work with planners. And you intentionally chose for your conference not to do a synchronous hybrid experience. Was cost of the venue part of that decision?
Part of that decision. We're a nonprofit. Not a medical or a scientific society. We don't have the budget. We put together a budget for a hybrid event and then laughed at it because we would end up losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. There was no price or cost structure that would work for us to be able to do that. And, you know, the venues will work with us to a point, but they need to make money as well. So yeah, we're focusing more on, like Jillian said, we're being very intentional, letting people know it's an in-person event with on-demand content that will be available later with a virtual component. For those who can't attend, they can still consume the content, but it will be a little bit different than what we've been talking about today, which is the intentional joining of two audiences.
Well, and as Dana pointed out, your son Kyle won't be able to dance to Paula Abdul during dinner if you go back in person.
Very true, but I have videos of him, so he can dance to the videos.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us and participating in the chat and the polls and the Q&A. And if we can show some emoji love to Alison and Jillian for joining us today. They were rock stars in the conversation. So thank you guys very much. And Jillian mentioned micro events in the chat. I think that's a whole nother series of conversation that we should continue. But thank you guys so much for joining today. It was a wonderful conversation. I'm glad we had it. And we're looking forward to see everyone next time. So thanks for joining, everybody. Have a great day.